Protests have long been an essential part of the American life, employed to draw attention to critical issues, events, and injustices. Ranging from peaceful marches to powerful acts of civil disobedience, protests can be found in nearly every political and social movement in our country's rich history. Before the Bill of Rights even existed, Americans were protesting unjust treatment. On December 6, 1772, colonists, angry at Britain for imposing taxes on colonies when they had no representation in Parliament, boarded docked British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into the Boston Harbor. We're all familiar with that story, but the actions of that day later set the principles for the First Amendment, which allows the right of people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Whether one favors or opposes an issue, the federal government does not have the authority to silence free expression. This is the bedrock on which the right of protesting rests. This past year, Americans have found themselves in the streets in record numbers demonstrating their constitutional rights. And now, in the wake of the George Floyd verdict, certain states are introducing punitive new measures aimed at governing protests. Numerous Republican-led states are passing legislation that can undermine the First Amendment and also put the lives of demonstrators in danger. The measures are part of a wave of new anti-protest legislation sponsored and supported by conservatives. Just in the 2021 legislative session, Republicans have introduced 81 bills in 34 states aimed at suppressing protests. This is double the number of anti-protest laws that have been filed in any other year. The bills range from criminalizing protest to making it easier for people to harm protesters without consequences. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed a bill into law that grants protection for people who drive their car into a protesting crowd, potentially injuring the protesters and penalizing those participating in uprisings. The law grants civil legal immunity to people who drive through protesters blocking a road, which Democrats argued might have protected the white nationalist who ran over a counter-protester in Charlottesville in 2017. Similar incidents have happened across the country in the past few years. Last year, in New York City, a police officer plowed through a group of protesters who were blocking the road and attempting to stop the vehicle from leaving. In 2020, two incidents involving vehicles and protesters occurred on the same night in Los Angeles. A truck trying to maneuver through a sea of protesters collided with one and then quickly sped off. Two protesters in Seattle were hit by a speeding car that drove into a crowd demonstrating on an interstate highway, causing injuries that led to the death of one while leaving the other in serious condition.
We need paramedics right now!
These bills don't only deter people from protesting in the streets. Similar legislation in Indiana would bar anyone convicted of an unlawful assembly from holding state employment. A Minnesota bill would prohibit those convicted of unlawful protesting from receiving student loans, unemployment benefits, or housing assistance. The laws also increase penalties for taking down monuments, including Confederate ones, making the offense a second-degree felony, punishable up to 15 years in prison.
I think it's really remarkable if you look at the breadth of this particular piece of legislation. It is the strongest anti-rioting, pro-law enforcement piece of legislation in the country. And there's just nothing even close.
The states in which these bills are being introduced and passed have received backlash from many social groups who say they violate their rights. In Oklahoma, more than a dozen Black Lives Matter advocates stormed the state's Capitol building while it was in session, forcing the state House of Representatives into lockdown. The nonprofit group Legacy Entertainment and Arts Foundation filed a lawsuit against Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. It argues that the new law violates the First Amendment protections for free speech, Eighth Amendment protections against cruel and unusual punishment, and the 14th Amendment protections of due process.
You want to come and demonstrate and express your concerns and do it in a peaceful manner, God bless you. That's what this state is all about, is allowing your opinions to be voiced and heard. And no place better than right here in Tallahassee. But if you decide to hurt somebody else or damage somebody's property, you know what? That's not welcome in the state of Florida.
It gives law enforcement the teeth they need to hold those accountable that commit violence, destruction, mayhem on those here in our state of Florida.
In 2020, all 50 states held protests in the wake of George Floyd's death. Now more than ever, Americans are exercising the First Amendment. These controversial measures may only exacerbate the very thing they're trying to subdue.